OK。じゃあ、始めましょう。
Welcome to the second module. In this module, we'll get further into the basics of the JavaScript language. There are certain things that you'll find in many modern programming languages, such as control structures, such as being able to figure out if something is true or how to handle something on a loop and these kinds of things. And we'll be doing that sort of work in this second module. And there's a lot of practice and there's a lot of opportunities along the way to really get used to the JavaScript syntax. And I encourage you to do as much of that as you possibly can because it will really help you learn JavaScript. So buckle up and let's go. This should be a really fun module for you to complete.
ビジュアルスタジオコードだな。これもう使ってるから。
In this lesson, we're going to be talking about working with a code editor. And I'm going to be specifically looking at Visual Studio Code, which I have a picture of here on this slide, but I also have it open over here in this tab. And you can go download Visual Studio Code for Mac or Windows for free. And it's a great code editor. If you prefer to use a different code editor, such as Atom or Sublime Text or something else, that's fine too, as long as it's got great features for editing code and it's not a word processor like Microsoft Word or something like that, then you'll be fine either way. But I'll be using Visual Studio Code throughout this course, so it might be helpful for you to use that as well. Okay, great. So sometimes when you open Visual Studio Code, you'll get these tabs open with a welcome or with new release notes if they've come out with a new version. And you can just close those tabs by clicking on the X. You'll notice I have Visual Studio Code open and running here, but I don't have any of those editors open. And I can make a new file by just going and choosing New File, and that creates a new file on here. Now, it's important with Visual Studio Code that before you do anything else, you save your file. That way it knows what type of file you're working with. So I'm going to choose File, Save As, and I'm going to just save this as myfile.html. So I'm going to save an HTML file to begin with on my desktop. Once I have an HTML file, then I can easily get the basic HTML structure by holding down Shift, pressing an exclamation point, and then pressing Tab. And that will give me the basic structure for my page. If you take an HTML class, you'll learn to type the doc type and to type all these tags. But we can use this shortcut. And again, what you do to get it, I'll just delete this, exclamation point, and then press Tab. And then you can come in here and give your document a name, My File. The title shows up in the tab in the browser, so that's kind of important. Great, so I can save that. Now, one thing to notice really quickly while we're here, see this dot up here? That means this file has changed and it has not yet been saved. One of the frequent mistakes I see at the beginning with users getting started with working with HTML and CSS and JavaScript is they'll add things to the file and then they'll forget to save them. And then they go to run the file and they realize their changes aren't showing up. So watch out for that little dot. You can get that to go away by doing File Save over here or Command S, Control S on Windows. And then it'll go back to just the X, which you would use to close that tab and close that window out. And then I can open this back up again by dropping it here. And that will open that file back up again. So that gets me some basics of getting files opened and working here in Visual Studio Code. A really important note if you're on Windows is open up just any Explorer window and click on the View tab and then go over and check the box that says File Name Extensions. That way, when you save your files, you'll see the .html file extension. And that's really important. Too many times I have students making files that say myfile.html.html. And that's largely because Windows hides those file extensions by default. But we really want to be able to see them. It's really important to be able to see them. And I would show you this on my Windows laptop, but my Windows laptop has a terrible sound card and recording audio on it. It just doesn't work out very well. But here I have a screenshot of it. So please make sure you do that. Also, make sure that when you save files, make sure that the file name is always lowercase and never has a space in it. So I have my file all as one word here. Do not put spaces in file names. I cannot be more explicit about that. Please do not put spaces in file names. It'll really cause problems for you. I'm back in my code editor, and now I'm ready to add a script. So let's add a script to this file, and we can see some JavaScript actually happen here. First, I'm going to put some HTML on the page, my first script. Nice if I spell that right. And then you can actually put scripts really anywhere inside this file. Sometimes they go in the head of the page here inside the head tag. Frequently, you'll see them down here just before the closing body tag. So I'm going to make a script tag. Make sure you spell it right. Script. Look at that. What a mess. I'm going to make a script tag. So I have a script tag, and I'm going to click between these two angle brackets here and move that down. Maybe I should do that again, just to make sure I get it right here. If that's confusing. Script, like so. There we go. And then it puts the cursor between the two, and I can move that down. And here I can make a variable, var hello equals good morning, Bill. And then in order to get it to do something, currently what we have to work with is the console, because that's what I've shown you so far in the other videos. We'll get to other things later and really pretty soon, but for right now we just have the console. So I can use console.log. Remember, we talked about this method before. Hello, to put that variable, or really the string associated with that variable, into the console. So,
ここまでを一回やってみると、ベーシック。ブラウザもいけるかな。アーカイブズとか作って。ここまで作って、ブランチ。JS として、JS。ビジュアルスタジオコードを起動。違うな。JavaScript 面積なので、ここが基準になるんだ。で、これは、実行ウィンドウをこっちに書き換える。さて、こっちでは、 ここに新しいファイルで、して、M ってダブルクリックできると。まあ、それはいいとして、必要なものを設定しよう。拡張機能ではエディターコンフィグレスでバリダランスエンター、バーベル、ジャカバスクリプトを有効。ビューティファイも入れてみましょう。そしてコードビルダー。ジャバいらない。HTML、CSS サポート。ボイラープレート。あとはライブサーバーだかな。マークダウンプレビューはいらない。エディターでコードフォーマット。今度ローマ入れたいとこだね。こんなもんでいきましょう。そうすると、そして、スクリプト。こうやバー、エロイコール、と、モーニング、ワールドで、ゴールデンログ、エロ。これで、ランはできない。デバッグの開始。クロームで、クロームじゃないな。こう、デバッグ、こう、構成の追加。エッジランチ実行そこに並ばもできる。けど、それじゃなくて、作ったからには、ライブサーバーで開いた方がいいか。そうすると、ここは、切り替え。画面は、コーセラに戻って、そして今のやつを作ると、Firefox で開く。全然見えない。で、ここは、動き類を全部見せると、うーん、そっか。H1。はい。ファースト。そうすると、ここで、グッドモーニングワールド出てるね。オートページやつが出るのは、まあ、いいでしょう、ここは。ということで、とりあえず実行ができた。
So I can save this file. Notice the dot up here. I have to save it. I can save the file, and then I can go over to Chrome over here, and I can go to File and Open. Or on Windows, you can do Command O, and then here I am on my desktop, and I can open this file. And it comes up, and it doesn't really look like much. It's just a web page, and we're not even seeing the script run. But if we go and choose Inspect, and then click on the console, you'll see that it comes up here. And my JavaScript is actually running, and it's doing this. So that's actually working great, and really cool. We've gotten our first script to run. The next thing to talk about is how we can make some comments in JavaScript in case we want to remind ourselves exactly what we're doing. It's always good practice to add comments to your scripts so that when you come back to them later, you know what's going on. And there are two ways of making comments in JavaScript. I can use the slash twice, 2 slashes, and I can
コメ
type
ントだからあんまり意味はないね。
the variable is below, or something like that. Or the variable below, I don't know, we could say something else about it. But putting 2 slashes, 2 forward slashes here, will keep JavaScript from trying to do anything with this line here. If you want to have a longer comment, you can use the slash and a star, and then end the comment with a star and a slash. And then in here, I can put a longer comment about anything that I want, and it can go multiple lines, like so. So I can have that start with a slash star and end with a star slash. And that will help me make comments in my code so that later when I come back to try to find out what I was doing, I can leave notes for my future self, which is super helpful. While we're here, another thing that's important is I can actually make the code in the browser larger or smaller by pressing the Command plus or Control plus on Windows on my keyboard here. Whoops, click on that. And that will make the code larger or smaller. And I can make this window over here smaller too. If the code is getting squished in there, you can close it all together. This thing opens and closes that Explorer. But I can make the code larger or smaller. And depending on how good your eyes are, you might want the code to be larger or smaller. Command 0 will put it at its default size. But Command minus will make it smaller. So make sure you're setting your code to a size that's comfortable for you to read, because a lot of times when I'm working with students, I notice that they're having a hard time seeing the difference between a semicolon and a colon. You know, those are 2 different characters. And if you're having a hard time seeing the difference between the characters, then the code is probably too small for you. So make sure you set it at a comfortable size.
とりあえず最初のコメントができるというやつ。続き。
The next thing to talk about is folders and working with folders for projects. This file, myfile.html, this file here, is just sitting on my desktop. And that's fine for a single file. But usually if I'm working on a project, I'm going to have a folder with a bunch of related files. I might have an HTML file, I might have a CSS file, I might have multiple JavaScript files as we get going here. But for right now, this is just a single file. And that's not really very useful by itself. So over here, I'm going to make a folder. And I'm going to give the folder a name. My project. Notice there are no spaces in that folder name. Never put a space. Also, all the letters are lowercase. It'll just make your life so much easier if you keep everything lowercase. It doesn't have to be, but you have to not have spaces. So my project. And then over here, I could open up this sidebar. I'm going to close this file and open up this sidebar here. And no folder opened. I can actually open that folder. My project. And now you can see I've got my welcome screen again, and I've got my project here. And there's no files in this folder currently. I just made a folder and it's empty. But I can put a file in that folder, going to close that welcome screen. Over here, this button will create a file. This button will create a folder. Be sure you're not confused between the two.
一緒に開い
So
た
if
ら
I
どう
make
す
a
る
new
かって
file,
話で
suppose
す
I
ね。
make a file and call it index.html. That's going to be an HTML file, and I can put that in my folder. And now you'll notice it's created the index file. And not only that, but if I look in my project folder over here, you can see that index.html has been created in that folder. And so I can manage my whole project from here. Perhaps I have another file in here. I'm going to have styles.css. So maybe that's going to have some styles for my web page. And it's going to go into that file. So now that file is now in the folder over here. And in this way, I can control and keep track of all the files for my project, and they're all in one place. Remember, I said earlier, you have to get really good at file management, and you have to make sure that all the files for a project stay in the folder. And you might have other folders in the folder. So if I come back here, I might make a folder for images. Now this is a folder.
まあ、基本的なプロジェクト構造
Currently
っていうの
there's
があっ
nothing in the
て、
folder, but if I look in this folder, over here you can see that the folder images is here. And I could put images in there. Be careful when you're creating files not to accidentally put the file inside the folder if you don't mean to. So if I click new file here, it's going to create this file inside of images. Oops.html.
So this
file is actually inside the images folder here, and I can see it over here as well as being inside the images folder. If I decide I don't want that file, I can right-click here and choose delete. It'll ask me, do I really want it to the trash? And sure enough, from over here, that file is now not inside that folder. The folder is empty again. So by working with this Explorer over here, we can create files and manage files for our projects and make sure that the files are in the correct places at all times.
Comment it has been like with this. だったらコモンエリアよくあるエラー、ワーキングファイル作ってるときに、まあ、こいつからのまず、セービングファイルズインダロングフォルダー。これぐらいかな。正しい回答はすべて変更しませんでした。too small は difficult to see。ここら辺かなとは。正解。まだか。Save has two sets of tickets. Always use the first thing and never personalize your coding experience. これも正解。エクステンションついてない話か。拡張子も楽しみにしなきゃ間違えるよっていう
The last new thing that I have for this lesson is I just want to show you that Visual Studio Code is very customizable. You can add all kinds of extensions to it. And if I click on this gear icon down here, I can get into the settings. And I can do all kinds of things in here with extensions and other kinds of things. So for example, you can search for
Visual Studio Code を使えば拡張機能でいろいろカスタマイズできます。
Now turn off the settings. But you can do all kinds of fun things to make Visual Studio Code more personalized. Maybe you like this black look for your code editor, or perhaps you prefer a lighter theme. I installed this extension here called Atom 1 Light Theme, and you can click on that And currently it's disabled, but I can
そういうの入れ
enable
てるん
this
だ。
theme. And
アイスバーグでいいよ
I
ね。
think down here should be able to choose feature contributions. Should be switching here.
あと、
Not sure why that didn't switch. This happens sometimes. Oh, select color theme. There we go. So here I've got
まあ、ライトと
the
ダー
color
クある
themes that
両
I
方
can
あるの
select
今
out of
だ
them.
から。
Sometimes you have to mess around with this extensions in the theme editor and the settings to sort of really figure it out. But there's all kinds of themes that you can get for Visual Studio Code to customize it and make it look the way you want it to look. And I can go back to my files, and here I am. And so now you'll notice that my files will look a little bit different because I'm using the Atom 1 Light theme. So just to remember here, we've done quite a lot to make this page. Whoops. I don't know why it's not letting me edit my file. To make this page different here.
違うページとかって。
I'm going to redo that last part because I kind of messed that up a bit. So you can see here I am in my project again for my index file. And I can come over here and click. And just to review what we did in this lesson, I can type an exclamation point and press tab to get the basic structure of a page. And I can add a title for my document here that will show up on my page. I can add some HTML. I'm just going to add an H1. Here is a heading. And then I can add some script tags. And I can add a script to my page.
これは
So
見
I
せていい
could
か
do
な。
something like var my variable. And set it to hello. And then I could console log out, console.log my variable. Notice it pops up here. I can even just press, I don't even have to type the whole thing. I can just press return to get it to pop that in place so I make sure I don't spell it wrong. And then a semicolon. Semicolons are used in JavaScript at the ends of statements. I can save that file, and then I can come back to the browser and test it. Let's do that really quick. Come
テ
back
ス
here
ト
to
してみること
Chrome.
はできる。
This is the other file. So I'm going to open this file. I can do Command O. And there we go. My project, index, and there it is. And it's doing hello there. So the hello came up in the console log there. So that's a review of everything we learned in this lesson. You're now able to work with files and get those files to output content into the console that you can then test in your browser. And that's a great way of working. Another way of opening your file is to right-click on the file and choose Open With and tell it to open with the browser. You could even try a different browser. Brave is a great browser to try. Brave is using the same rendering engine as Chrome, so it actually works the same way as Chrome generally. But what's interesting about Brave is that the CEO of Brave is actually that Brendan Eich guy who invented JavaScript. So it's kind of interesting to note that the guy who invented JavaScript is now in the business of creating a browser. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, great. This will get you started, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson where we can start writing some interesting scripts.
次。これでできるようになったから。
Operators, Booleans, and selection in JavaScript. Operators in JavaScript are
まずは
the
in that
symbols that will allow us to create different expressions in JavaScript. And here are just a few of them. We've already seen the plus sign and the equal sign, which remember, equals is an assignment operator. There's
ここ
also
ら
a
辺は
minus
普
and
通の言語からです、ここね。
the asterisk is used to multiply and the forward
実
slash
測演
is
算
used
と
to
イコー
divide.
ル。
And
そ
the
して、
percent is a
パーセントで
modulus
も割
operator.
合。
If you want to find out more about operators, you could come over to the W3 Schools website and look at the
ス
different
トリング、
operators.
文字列と
Get all listed here. Comparison
比較演算
operators,
子。
logical operators, and all kinds of stuff here.
はい、ポップ。
So you can come through and find all the details about all of the different
イン
operators
スタンス
if
も
you
あったん
want
ですよ、い
to
や。
there. But we're just going to start
こ
with
れ
a
の
few
が
of
わ
them
かんな
so
くなっ
it's
た
not too
ら、
overwhelming. And
まあ、
most of
ロー
the
算出すれ
operators
ば。
are very similar to what you would find in other C-based programming languages. C, C++, C Sharp, Objective-C, so on and so forth. Okay, so there's also Booleans in JavaScript, and it's very nice to know that a Boolean can have two values, true or false, and that's it. So here I'm making a variable called happy, and I've assigned it the value of true. Notice that true is not inside quotes. JavaScript knows what true means. True is a keyword that means that something is true. And false is a keyword that means that something is
まず、
false.
ブー
So
リ
I
アン
have a
型があっ
variable here, set,
て、
that's false.
ブルーってファル
I
スの
can
認
use
識が
an
取る。
if statement to check to see if something is true. So if
実際にアンディ
happy,
フトヌルがある
now
からね。
happy has assigned true to it, so it's going to do something here. If I were to replace happy with sad, then the else would fire instead of the if, and we would do something down here if happy was false. Or if I changed the value here from true to false, then happy would be false. And it would do this down here. So that gets us started with a little bit of that. So next, we're going to move to our code editor and make a file and try working with some selections and booleans and that kind of fun stuff.
見ましょうか。
Here I am in my code editor.
さてと、マイプロジェクトを作ってみる。まあ、ここは閉じて、ここに、新しいフォルダーとして、マイプロジェクト。これは削除だ。作るのはフォルダーだから、でマイプロジェクトの下に、プラスインデックス点 HTML。そして、ここに新しいフォルダーとして CSS。新しいフォルダーとしてイメージズ。インデックスネームにダッシュ。マイプロジェクト。H1 のマイプロジェクトを JavaScript。これも本当にわかんだけど。で、ダブルクリックすれば、マイプロジェクトフォーラブス。そしてここにスクリプト。は、hello イコール。 0、コンソール、ログ、括弧の0と。そうすると、ここね、インスペクト。コンソール。カマスミレーションは、下側に表示と。これでいいでしょう。これを小さくして、続き。
editor, and I'm going to make a new file. And I'm going to make a file. I'm going to, before I do anything, I'm going to save the file. Save, and I'm going to just save it on the desktop, and I'm going to call it selections.html. Notice all lowercase, no spaces, and the .html extension. I'm going to save that on the desktop. And then again, the exclamation point will allow me to press tab, which gives me kind of my basic structure for my HTML page. And then I'm going to type in here testing selections and booleans. There we go. And then in here, I'm just going to add an H1 testing selections. There we go. That's nice. And then I'm going to add a script tag. So we'll go ahead and add a script in here. And then what are we going to put in the script? Well, let's make some booleans. I'm going to have var red, and I'm going to set that to a value of true. And then I'm going to have var blue, and I'm going to set that to a value of false. There we go. So I've got two values here. One is set to true and the other one is set to false. Now, if I were to make an if statement, if parentheses, and I were to check the value of those, red, I'm going to check the value of red. If red is true, which it is, then something's going to happen here. Something happens. Red is going to evaluate to true because I have true assigned to the red variable here. If I were to put blue in here, then this would not be true, in which case something else would happen. So I'm going to come down here and add else. Now this else statement, sometimes you'll see it up on the same line like this, and sometimes you'll see it on the next line like that. That doesn't really matter. That's a styling choice. Some people like to keep their code a little bit more compact and put it like this. Some people find it's a little bit easier to read if it's like that. So that's up to you. And then something else would happen here. Console.log the statement is false.
行きましょ
う。And up here we'll do
こ
console.
れが出なければいい。ここで、テストセレクション& 無理やん。まあ、ここで実行してもいいけど、ああ、これもエッジが入ってるからか。バーレットイコールデル、バーブルイコールファルス。に、レク。で、ここで、if か、えっと、コンソール、ログのです。コンソール、このノットで、ファルスと。で、この場合、レッドはレッドか実行すると、これは、えーっと、構成をちょっと変えてみよう。構成を開く。エデュケーション。はい、これで違う。ここで、ターゲットは、インデックスってやってみようか。1、ベーシック、マイプロジェクトのインデックス。マイプロジェクト。リクエストローンチ。これは違うな。ローンチを消そう。で、構成の追加。HTML の拡張機能。インストール。ブラウザ。機能詳細。向こうの、いや、全部でいい、これいいや。そして、これを、ストップライブサイバーのレビューインデフォルト。そっか。ライブサーバーの距離圏ではないけど、こっちで表示はされる。セキュリティポリシーが出たな。スクリプトを出していいよとして、レッドが表示される。OK。 これは小さくして、エッジは短くして、取る。
The statement is true. Very exciting. Now we can try this out. We can come over here to our
そう。
browser. I'm going to make a new tab
これを
here,
もう今みたいにいくと、こ
and
っ
I'm
ちの
going to
コンソ
open
ール
this
がレッ
file.
ド。
Selections
is true.
open, and I've got my testing selections. If I right click and choose inspect, I can go to the console, and sure enough, the statement is true. Now I can come back to my code editor, and if I change this to blue, blue is false, so this statement will run. So if I come back and then refresh, now the statement is false.
It is false になる。
Or alternatively, I could change the value here to false. Change that.
で、ここのレッドイコールファルスとすれば、メンティストルまたはメンティスファルス。if のどこで出るってことだね。これは、ブルーでやって、こうしてやると、
Save that, and then come back, and you'll see
ステートメントに
that
ファ
in
ルスになる。
fact
これはうちの方でも、例えば、ここで、ダウンロードじゃなくて、ユーザーズ、ワークスペース投げ、こせら、UC デーブスを開くと、同じように切れてるから、読み込み可能にして、検証すると、コンソール。コンソールだけになる。いいね。そして、続き。ラブソンドックスは、じゃないからいいや。
it's still coming up false. One thing to note is I've added some extra spaces in here. Usually you won't see programmers doing that. Usually you'll see it more like this. I just add the extra space in there just to make it a little bit easier to read and a little bit easier to evaluate. But the spaces aren't necessary there. Oftentimes you'll see a space here, and that's fine too. But it's not necessary either down here. I think this one put a space in whether I wanted it or not, and that's fine. So red is either false or true, and blue is either false or true because I've used these booleans here. True. The syntax highlighting should help you. If you spell true wrong like I just did, it should tell you, whoops, something's wrong there because the color isn't right. And now the statement is true.
Try this.
This is interesting. Let's try this. I'm going to make a variable called green and then see what happens if I pass green in here. Notice green doesn't have a value here. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to make a variable.
これはなかなか面白いパターンになる。 レッド、グリーンだけはできるかな。こうやると、問題こう見てるね。こうやると、声は、ファルシになる。だからエクスプレッションノットアベイバルだから、エラーが出てるな。イコール。こうやれば、このまんま、is false。これはサンドボックスで練習することもできる。やってみましょう。サンドボックスでは、ここで勝手にというか、環境が動いて、表示がされて、開始と。はい。抜いとい、はい。はい。今やったことをここでできる。ゲッティングスターじゃないよ。プレビュー違うよ。プロジェクト。リード MD を抜け。オープンフォ
I'm
ル
going
ダ。
to make a variable green
これもい
and
い
just put
か。
a semicolon. And then down here, I'm going to test green. Is green true or false? What do you think is going to happen here? Let's test that. The statement is false. This is an important thing to understand about JavaScript. Green is essentially undefined. It's an undefined variable. Undefined resolves as false in JavaScript. JavaScript has a concept of truthy and falsy, which is kind of fascinating. So things are either true-ish or false-ish. And they could be explicitly true or false, like red and blue are here, but they could be false-ish. And JavaScript treats variables that are undefined as false. Also,
だからこの場合、
green equals null. That will be false.
そう点
So that comes up
ログ。
false. Green equals 0.
グリーン
0 is
イコール
false.
イコール
But if I put any other number in there, any other
グリーン。
real number, like a 1,
型はないんだから適当にできるとこか。
1 is true. What about 100?
グリーンイコー
That'll
ル
be true
1とす
too.
ると、
What about minus 100?
ステートメントで取る。
That's true as well. So numbers are true except for 0. 0 is falsy. It's false-ish. So 0 comes up as false,
マイナス
which is
1。
kind of an interesting thing. So things that we know are false are undefined is false, null is false, 0 is false, false is false. Other things are true. What if I put like
もっとグリーン。
cheese?
じゃあ、文字列の場合。当
Cheese
然
is
文字
true.
列の場合は同じように考え
So
て、
that's a very interesting thing about JavaScript.
どうせスポンスは決めましょう。 て、ちょっと待って。
Let's look at comparing values. This is something we'll do a lot in JavaScript. So we often want to find out if the value here is the same as the value somewhere else. So I'm going to go back and leave.
ここで、ヌルストリングからの文字列の場合は、からの文字列の場合は、ファルスになる。で、なんか入れると、からじゃない文字列の場合は、ブルーが返ってくる。さーて、じゃあ続きのビデオ。
Green here is undefined, like so. And then I'm going to make a new variable, var mynum, and assign it the value of 5. And var other num, and assign it a value of 5. And then down here, I can check to see if mynum is the same as equals other num. It's really important to read this as the same as. This is assigns. 5 is assigned to other num, and 5 is assigned to mynum. But here I'm checking to see, is mynum the same as the other num? And in this case, it is. So if I save this and test this, you'll see the statement is true because mynum is the same as the other num. Okay, if I change this to a different number, then I'm obviously going to get false. That's not true. So the statement is false. They're not the same as. I can use, instead of equals, I could use exclamation point equals. And that'll be not the same as. So is that true? Is my num not the same as other num? Yes, that's true. Statement is true. So we can do this kind of thing as well. We can also check for greater than or less than. So we could say, is my num less than? Oops. Is it less than my other num? And that should be true because my num is less than the other num. Let's see. And that statement is true. I could try, is it greater than? Is my num greater than the other num? Is that true? No, that's not going to be true because 5 is not greater than 6. But we can test for these different kinds of scenarios. My num and other num, we can use less than and greater than and check to see if that's true. Let's try this out. This is interesting. Var not num equals quote 5. So this 5 is a string with the number 5 in it. Now can I check to see if my num is the same as not num? What do you think I'm going to get there if I save that and try that? The statement is true. Well, that's interesting. How can a 5 be the same as
S イコール数値の5にして、これ当然変換するはずだからか。こういう風にして、ナム大なり、ナム捨てとやるとどうなる？ グリーンイコールチーズじゃないね。これも結構、文字列に書してから変換するから、ナムイコール、ナムコンマ、ナムツだね。ナム1だな。ナム2。ナム1イコールナム1。コンマ、ナム2イコール、ナム2とする。ナム1とナム2は、なかなか面白い形になるはずだ。今のこうやって、おかしいね。おかしくないか。じゃあ、当然、イコールイコール。ナムにはスです。ストリート。ナム S にすべきか。ナム S。ナム S は文字列の場合、イコールイコールにすると、当然、トゥルーになる。ああ、そっかそっかそっか。ここでナム2になるはずはない。ここはナム S になる。こうやって比較する。ナム S トゥルー。これ結構大事な話だから、結構いいね。
5 inside quotes. Remember, JavaScript is loosely typed and it allows for something called type coercion. So, what's going on here is that
これは
JavaScript is
型は変
saying,
換
well,
さ
we've
れ
got a
て、
5 here and we've got a 5 in a string, and they're basically the same. So, I'm going to call that true. So, that's truthy. It's
形
true-ish.
含も含めて、
Sort of. You can think of it that way, which is very interesting. Now,
こ
again, this is the
れ、
kind of thing that can drive programmers
チェックも
crazy
含めてやると、
because you could end up making a mistake in your program or having something unexpected
この場
happen.
合
And you
は、
don't want unexpected things to happen in your programs. That's never a good thing. So, with,
トリプルイ
I
コール。
believe it was ES5 in 2009, they introduced the triple equals
場合は
operator,
ファルスになる。
which is exactly the same as, and that won't do type coercion. And remember, this is the kind of thing that we're working with in JavaScript. They don't want to just get rid of the double equals or change what it does, because that would break other programs. That would break programs that have been happening in the past. But they can add another operator, which is the triple equals, and that one will not do the type coercion. So you'll notice this one will come up false. That statement is false because it won't do the type coercion. There's also the same thing with the exclamation point. So you could say that's not exactly the same as. So you can read this as, is my num exactly the same as not num? And the answer is no. Generally, it's considered better programming to use the triple equals sign everywhere. Often in our
だから
shorter
安全のた
scripts,
めに
it
は、
doesn't really matter. And
JavaScript と
you'll
トリ
see
プル
me
イコールを
use
使うべきって
equals
話だよ
equals
ね。
all the time. But really, if you want to get in the habit, get into really good habits, always use the triple equals sign so that you don't ever have any type coercion unless you really want it for some reason. And again, this is kind of an odd thing about JavaScript that it can do this, but it makes the language very expressive, and that's kind of interesting. Expressive in the sense that, these things are kind of the same. A number 5, it's the same as the 5 in quotes. So that's kind of interesting. One more thing I want to check out here really quickly while we're here. I'm going to change this 5 to something like chicken. And then I'm going to make a new variable, var
そうすると、
value
例えば、
equals not num minus my num. What the what? I'm going to take a chicken and subtract 5.
じゃあ、これはちょっとやってみようね。else const body v2 イコールチキンマイナス5。バーイコール v2 として、if v2 が数字引く6はアンコードシンタクスエラー。あらどこがシンタクスエラーって、ここが抜ける。カッコ閉じるで。これで、抜くと、そっか。数字ではないっていうなるわけね。なんだかわかんない。だから計算不可となる。
That doesn't make any sense. What happens if I put my value in here? You probably won't be surprised to see that that comes up false. That's false. And more than that, if I come down here and just console.log my value, just to see what's actually in that value, my value, when I try to take a chicken and subtract 5 from it, what do I get over here? Nan, not a number. Nan is another thing in JavaScript that is falsy. So in our list of things that are false are 0, false, undefined, null, and not a number. Those things all come up false in JavaScript. And that's kind of an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward with working with JavaScript and working with Booleans and when we're testing values.
Which ever true, my happy equal true. My name 数字で出るになる。アンペ文字はあるからこうなると。はいと。Which of the following statement will evaluate to false? 数字が出るの場合。ヌルはヌルになるんだよね。ヌルはヌルの結果でヌルになるはずだ。だって、V にイコール。ヌルの場合は、ファルスが出る。ラストネーム、アンジャーヒンの文章がなる。アンジャーヒンが出て、トゥルーじゃない。というわけで、ここまでの OK。次は else if。
JavaScript has an else if so that we can run through a series of selection checkers to see which one is true. So let's type this out. It's always a good idea to practice this stuff as much as you can and get used to the syntax. Again, there are 2 humps to get over with JavaScript. And the first one is done just by practicing, by just writing the stuff and making mistakes and forgetting to put in the semicolon or the curly braces or the square brackets and seeing what happens when you get an error. So let's go ahead and type this in over here. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to add, maybe I want to comment this out. In Visual Studio Code, I can do Option, or in Windows, Alt, Shift A, and that will comment. That'll put a comment around something that I've selected. So down here, I'm going to make a variable, var colors equals square bracket, quote, red, green, blue.
さあ次は LSF について。LSF を作ってみる。My プロジェクト、新しいファイル。if JavaScript の LSF。Again。1 JavaScript。LSF。一応何つもりが抜けなかったな。スクリプト。タイプ。テキスト。プラス JavaScript。やって、コンスト。カラーズ。ゴール。グリーン。ブルー。
Yellow. And I'm going to make a variable var selected color equals colors, square bracket, I don't know, we'll do 3. Red is 0, 1, 2, 3. Now over here, so I've got that, and that's great. Now I can do an if-else statement. So I could do if selected color is the same as equals red, or let's do red in quotes, red.
Cool.
If it's the same as red, then I can console log something out. Console.log the color is red. Now I can do an else if, and again, I could put else if on this line here, like so. I think it's a little bit easier to read if you move it down like this. Else if selected color, and here I'm going to
ここに同じようにちょっとセルトでやってみる。チェックをしてみる。 コンソールで、ログ、カラー、イズ、レッド、こういうふうになる。else, if, select、2つしてブルーならば、そうで、僕、カラー、イズ、ブルー。さあ、これで、こう、プレビュー、1テーブルとブラウザ。こうしなきゃダメなのか。結果として、コンソールは、あれシンタックスエラーが出た。ブレースが抜けてた。これで実行すると、英語からイエローで、それしか出ないよと。じゃあそのコードを作ってみ
Cheat
よ
by
う。
copying and pasting. Else if selected color is blue. And again, I'm just adding these extra spaces because I think it's a little bit easier to read, but it's not really common practice, but that's okay. If the selected color is blue, then I'm going to console log out. Blue. Actually, I should do green. Green is next. It doesn't matter. I can go whichever order I want. In this, I'm just going to go to green because that sort of makes sense. And then I can copy and paste the else if selected color is, change this one to blue, blue. And if it's not red, green, or blue, then it must be yellow.
こんにちは。
はい、こんにちは。いや、こんばんはですかね。だって、今、JavaScript で if と else if のところまでやってます。
Okay, great. So
ここですね。
with this script in place, we can test this. We can come over here and refresh this, and you can see the color is yellow. It went through that list of items.
コアセラって日本語教材少なそうですがどんな感じですか？
ほとんど英語ですね。
So 0, 1.
ただ、プログラミングとかは画面を見ればある程度わかるので、その部分は楽です。
Now, what happens if I make a mistake? Suppose I put 4. 0, 1, 2, 3.
Red, green, blue,
There's
else
no
yellow.
4. Let's see what I get over
おい
here.
おいおい。わざと
You're
読んで
going
て
to
いる。
get mistakes. You're going to have errors. And this said the color is yellow.
ここはわざとやってますね。まず、このカラーを2として、じゃない、ブルーにしてみやすい。ブルーにしてちゃんとブルーと出るかどうかを実装してみる。こう、ほい、ほい、ほいほい、ほいと。ここはグリーン。 トして、最後は、イエローと。で、セレクトは、カラーズから、ブルーのはずの2をセレクトする。そうすると、セレクトカラーでカラーイズブルーとなって、問題なしとなる。で、3、イエローを選ぶと、カラーイズイエローとなる。で、わざと4を選ぶ。この場合、アウトオブディファインの場合は、アンディファインドになって、エルスが通ってイエローになると。さて、そこからがビデオの続きですね。
Because the else ran, which was not really what I wanted, but it is sort of doing that kind of thing. Or let's see what happens if I make a mistake and I forget to put commas in here. This is a common mistake that I see from students, is they'll forget to put the commas in the array. What happens if I do that?
それはなかなか問題出そうな。
Uncut syntax error, unexpected string on line 29. So that gives you a notion that you should come back and take a look at line 29 and see what's going on in there. And hopefully, with this stuff in here, these little red underlined stuff going on there, you'll see that something's wrong there and you'll put the commas back in. Very common mistake when we're starting with this thing. Okay, so you can try these different scripts and see how they work and what they do. It's really helpful to do that.
次にスイッチステートメント。スイッチケース、デフォルトですね。
JavaScript also has a switch statement, which will take a value, like selected color, and run it through a bunch of cases. In case it's red, it'll do this. In case it's blue, it'll do that. In case it's green, it'll do that. And then at the bottom, there's a default. You can add a default, and it'll do this if none of these other ones are true. It's important with selection that you add this break in here as well. So the break will keep the, will bump out of the switch when one of these true statements comes up. So let's take a look at this really quickly and see what we get over here. Statement, which will take a value, like selected color, and run it through a bunch of cases. In case it's red, it'll do this.
で、ブレークで抜ける。これはまあ定番ですな。じゃあちょっと書いてみましょう。スイッチのセレクト。セレクト。で、ここはケース。ケースレッドは、コンソールログのカラーイズレッドブレック。ケース。グリーン。で、コンソールカラーイズグリーンのブレーク。ブレークがなければなくてもいい方がいいっていうのも発想してありますね。ケース。ブルー。コンソールログのブレーク。最後。じゃないね。ケース。 ケースイエロー。コンソールロゴでカラーイズイエロー。ブレイク。最後。デフォルト。コンソールオフ。カラーセレクト。ブレイクだ。この場合は、これで実行すると、またシンタックス出た。どこかケースが間違ってるって。ケース。スイッチセレクト。ここが抜けるようになって、ケースとなって、コンソールの問題なしと。これで実行すると、アンダーイングでノーダー。続き。
In case it's red, it'll do this. In case it's blue, it'll do that. In case it's green, it'll do that. And then at the bottom, there's a default. You can add a default, and it'll do this if none of these other ones are true. It's important with selection that you add this break in here as well. So the break will keep the, will bump out of the switch when one of these true statements comes up. So let's take a look at this really quickly and see what we get over here. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to comment out these if-else statements. Again, I'm going to select them and then do Option or Alt-Shift-A in Visual Studio Code to quickly just comment those out. So I'm not running that anymore. And then down here, we can run a switch statement. Switch parentheses, and I'm going to put in here the value I'm checking is selected color. And then the switch statement, I'm just going to paste it in here because it's a little bit tedious to watch me type it all, but I'm going to paste it in here. But I recommend that you type it. So type out case red console.log. The color is red, and then a semicolon, so that's the statement that's going to run, and then break. And it can be on the same line on my slide. I have on the next line, but you can put it on the same line here. Rather than watch me type all of these, I'm going to just paste them in here. But you should type it in because learning the syntax, you'll learn it by typing it, not by watching me do it. So go ahead and make these files and type these in here so you can test it out. And then notice how I've got red, green, blue, and yellow. And up here, if I set selected color to 3, I should get, 0, 1, 2, 3, I should get yellow. So let's see if I get that, if I come over here and test this. And sure enough, the color is yellow. So that's coming up great. And I could change this to 0, which will get me the first one. So now I've got red, and that break is bumping me out of there. But if I were to set it to something past the end of my array, so 0, 1, 2, 3, if I set it to 4, the default will run, and I get, there was an error because I'm outside of my array. So the default option ran down here. I didn't actually create a JavaScript error. I could do that really easily by doing something like, I don't know, spell break wrong. Break. And it even looks different in my code because it's not the right color. So I could do that. Let's see what that does. Oh, it's still running. It's an error. Because it didn't actually run that line, because that line wasn't true. If I set this up here to a 1, I think I'll get an error. Okay, uncut reference. Error, Breek is not defined on line 47. It did get the color is green, so it got that far in the script, and then it ran into a problem because I misspelled that. And I misspell things all the time. You will too. Don't worry about it. It happens all the time. Or what if you forget a semicolon? Sometimes forgetting a semicolon will really set it off as well. Unexpected token break on line 47. So these syntax are unexpected token. What does that mean? It's really expecting a semicolon token here, and it's seeing break instead. So it's confused by that. But these syntax errors, these error messages, are sometimes a little bit cryptic, and they take a little time to get used to them. But the switch statement is a great alternative for the else if. It takes up less space, and it can help you be very concise and specific with your code in a way that's helpful and useful.
そして、using and.
In JavaScript, we can check to see if multiple things are true by using the ampersand operator or the pipe operator. We'll look at the pipe operator next. But here we're using the ampersand operator, and we use two of them together here. And what we do is we check to see if this statement is true and if this statement is true. And for this whole thing to be true, when you use the and operator, both of these must be true in order for this to run. So I have to be in a good mood and have gotten sleep in order for today to be a good day. If either one of these is false, then I'm going to be grumpy. So let's just test this one really quickly, because I think it's just a good idea to practice typing these. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to turn this one off. Again, Option or Alt Shift A, comments it out. And then I'm going to do var good mood and set that to true. Var got sleep and set that to true. And then I'm going to say if parentheses, good mood, ampersand, got sleep. If both of those are true, then I can console log.
まずここまで実行。ここまでをシフト A コントロール Z 違う。選択範囲のねえ。パレット。いかない。じゃあ、ちょっといいや。 は、グッドムード。コールトルー。同じく、good。眠っている時間が十分なら、スルーとする。if, good mood, and, good sleep。コンソールの、
Today is a good day.
today is good day。そうじゃなければ、感想、学校の、I, グランピー。グランピーで疲れてるって言う。とりあえずビデオを見て、
Else, console.log, I am grumpy.
グランピーってなんだろう。まあ、そういう眠いとか疲れたっていう感じだよな。やる気出ないとか。で、これを実行した結果が、こっちに出てて、アンド、シンタクスエラー、ゴッド、あ、これいらないってことね。そうすると、they is a good day。ここはやっぱしここに、一応、こういう風に、今の状態を書いておくのが基本ですね。よいしょ。と、コロン、プラス、4、ゴッドスリープ。ああ、スリープ、コロン、プラス、スリープ。これをやれば、OK。じゃあ続き。
Now we can test this and we can see that because both of these are set to true, the if statement is going to run. Today is a good day. However, if I were to go in and change it so that one of these was false, it doesn't matter which one, then this whole statement will come back
よく寝
false.
てない場合は、
And I am grumpy. So that's kind of an important tool in our toolkit, is we can check to see if two things are true. If two things are true, then we can do something. If either one of them is false, then something else is going to have to happen. Now we can also use the double pipe. The pipe is the key on the American keyboard above the return key. Shift in that key up there. It's also got the backslash on it. Okay, so we could also
じゃあ今度は同じように、イコールイコール。ログサンプルは、カッコ、バー、ゲット、レコ、ルー、バー、ゲットランチ、ファルス、バー、ゲット、DI、コール、トゥルー。いいな。コンソール点、ログ、I, not, serving。この場合スタービングだな。空腹って意味だね。LG、コンソール。これを実行すると、あ、またエラーだ。どこが抜けてる？あ、ここがダブルコーテーションのシングルスになってる。で、ここ抜けば、こう、I am not starving。
by using the ampersand operator or the pipe operator. We'll look at the pipe operator next. But here we're using the ampersand operator, and we use two of them together here. And what we do is we check to see if this statement is true and if this statement is true. And for this whole thing to be true,
ここまでやって、
is different in that it's an or statement. So here, got breakfast is true, got lunch is true, but got dinner is false. But if any one of these is true, then the if statement rings as true. So they would all have to be false for me to be starving. Let's give it a try. Comment all this out. Bar got breakfast equals true. Bar got lunch equals true. var got dinner equals false. If got breakfast or got lunch or got dinner, if any of those is true,
どれかが食べたならば、
then console log. Things are okay. I forget what I put on my slide, but that's good enough. And then down here, else.
I'm hungry.
Log. I am starving. And there we go. So I can test this over here. And you can see things are okay, even though one of those was false. I would have to make all of these false.
そうそうそう。ここ全部。
to really
Things
be
are
starving.
okay.
And there we go.
全部ファル
Great.
スにす
You've
る。
learned a lot about Booleans in this lesson and what's true and what's false, and that some things are true-ish and some things are false-ish or falsy and truthy. Like 0 is considered false in JavaScript, or undefined, or null, or not a number is false. These are all considered false in JavaScript. And you've already learned a lot of the basics of JavaScript, and we're going to keep going with these basics. And I know that these scripts don't seem particularly interesting yet,
ここら
but
辺
I promise if you
は、全部ファルスならば、当然、スタービングとなる。これ、ちょっと気になるのは、例えば、get breakfast を true とする。で、ここに何を食べたかどうかをチェックする。ブレックファスト。コンマ。get breakfast。ランチ。get ランチ。コンマ。ディナー。get ディナーとする。こうすれば、食べたかどうかはチェックされると。Things are OK。じゃあ、ここで、get ランチ。アンディフにする。おお、わかんなくてもその時は OK なのね。OK。で、同じようにグランピーの方もやっといて、グランピーイコールヌル。と。両方これをやってみましょう。そうすると、アンダーフィンが I'm グランピー。サンプルの方に True アンダーフィンで OK。つまり、ちゃんと True アンダーフィン抜けるとそこは大丈夫ってことね。続き。
If you hang in there and keep working on this, then we will start making some interesting things pretty quickly. And we'll start manipulating content on web pages and doing all kinds of interesting stuff. So hang in there, keep going. And if you haven't had breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you're probably starving, so you should go eat something.
Items of choice that makes unique and sometimes change. Take that apply. JavaScript is loosely typed. こ これも違うな。こういう感じか？正しいからすべてできませんでした。Rules do not be used to write serious program. これはありそうな感じだな。いやいやいや、もう触ってるし。まず W デューティー。これは知ってる。こうか。正解、正解。はいと。最後。アディショナルリソース。というわけで、今のところで、やったね、ブーリアン、オペレー、基本的なストをやりましたと。というわけで、そろそろご飯なのとかもあるので、というわけで、オペレーターズブーリアン、数区演算と if 文まではやりました。まあ、簡単でしたね。一応確認したけど、ここら辺は、クリアになったので、今回はここまでにしときます。では、ありがとうございました。はい。では、さようなら。
ただいま、ディスコンネクト。
運が悪い。まあ